Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world. With self-care strategies from Chinese medicine, functional medicine, Ayurveda, neuroscience, and beyond. I'm your host, Brody Welch, a licensed acupuncturist and transformation catalyst, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Happy New Year! Happy 2020! And I guess we're off not only on a new year, but a new decade. So it's a great time to think about what intention you want to set for the year ahead and what practices need to be in place in order to support that intention. If you have a wellness goal, if you want to meditate or exercise or be eating better, reducing sugar and alcohol and caffeine, if you want to evolve and make time for what's most important to you, you have an opportunity to join my Level Up group starting January 21st. After most of us have given up on our New Year's resolutions, if we do not employ them with smart strategy and know what it takes to change a habit and know what kind of an inner dialogue we need to have in order to overcome the what the hell effect that can so often happen when we mess up, and being able to stick with something for long enough to become a new normal is really the key to a lifestyle change, which is what we're about. So if you're interested in having some support in stepping into who you're becoming next on whatever level, physical, emotional, relational, I encourage you to go to brodywelch.com/level up and check it out. This group is a potent and powerful community that incubates transformation. It attracts people who are super self-aware and motivated and willing to support each other on the journey, which is how we change the culture. So brodywelch.com, go to the Level Up page, read about it, get your application in, because we get rolling on January 21st and you don't want to miss out. This is the last time I'm running this group for the foreseeable future. And while people can still definitely coach with me one-on-one, there really is something wonderful and powerful about having the group energy. It's easier to fly south in a flock of birds as opposed to trying to go against the wind, against the grain of an entire culture by yourself. One of the things that I am working on in the new year is really getting okay with doing less. This is something that I have been struggling with and giving lip service to for a while, that I've kind of gone in and out of having success around. But it's really becoming clear to me that I need to get more comfortable with not having to earn the right to rest and play. That's some really old, deep conditioning and an old limiting belief that I somehow am not okay unless I am living beyond my energetic means, overworking and overserving. So it's like anytime I offer Level Up, I go through it myself with my own stuff that I'm working on, because it's always an upward spiral. Like there's always another layer that we can get to in our personal development and our self-awareness, and having our outsides match our insides as much as possible. So even though I have a whole bunch of interviews recorded for you, I am going to repurpose an interview that I did on Andrea Claassen's podcast, Peaceful Power, a while ago. I thought it was a really good interview. And so in the spirit of giving myself a little time off this season, I am rebroadcasting it with her permission here on A Healthy Curiosity, because I realize I don't even tell you guys about the other podcasts that I appear on as a guest. And so thought that it might be a fun turning the tables so that you can hear from me more than you hear from the people that I'm interviewing today. And that is in keeping with what was my power word for 2019, which is visible, or in this case, perhaps audible. I hope you enjoy it. Coming up for you in 2020, I'm so excited to share with you some of these interviews that I've been doing with people, really getting back to my Chinese medicine roots in a way. I originally started the podcast to bridge the gap between the people who knew stuff and the people who needed to know that stuff, right? That there's all this wisdom in alternative medicine and in these different modalities. And I created this show to originally bridge the gap and to be resources for people. But I realized that as into the sort of paradigm blending functional medicine, Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, that I get really excited about that overlap, but realizing that what I hear from lots of you about that you appreciate most is the Chinese medicine stuff. And so I am doing a kind of a series on Chinese medicine experts on different topics. So if you're subscribed to the show, you will be in for a bit of a deluge on the Chinese medicine approach to various aspects of things as it pertains to our health and wellness. So I hope you'll enjoy that. And I'd love to, as always, know what would be interesting for you to hear on the show. So please email me, Brody@BrodyWelch.com, and let me know. Anyway, I hope you enjoy today's rebroadcast from Peaceful Power on permission to slow down. And I hope that you indeed give yourself that permission.
Welcome to the Peaceful Power Podcast. I'm super excited today. I have Brody Welch on with me, and we're going to kind of dive into some great topics around stress and how to manage that in our lives. But first, I want to kind of throw it over to you, Brody, and let you kind of introduce yourself and a little bit about your background with Chinese medicine and, maybe how you've gotten to where you're at right now.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah.
I fell in love with Chinese medicine almost 20 years ago now. And it's basically because its philosophy deeply resonated with me that we are these ecosystems and that we're connected to nature and that everything in nature exists within the body and that any aspect of our human experience can be explained via Chinese medicine's energetics, the yin and yang and the five elements. And it's like all that really spoke to me. And so I have been practicing Chinese medicine, which is acupuncture, Chinese herbs, lifestyle and diet, counseling, as well as teaching people Qigong and meditation and yoga. And really, I've been doing that for 15 and a half years in Corvallis, Oregon. And then in the past couple of years, I've really recognized that Chinese medicine, it practiced in its most powerful sense, is not just like do me medicine where you go in and you have a practitioner throw needles at you or do some body work, but you really are engaged in a process of healing that involves applying Chinese medicine energetics to your daily life and actually implementing all the things that I feel like for forever, I've been writing little self-care reminders for people to, okay, go home and take a half an hour to yourself, or go home and do this breathing exercise, or go home and do this stretch, or change your diet in this way. And very intelligent, very motivated to change women, high achievers, all of them, would come back saying that they did their self-care for about 3 days and then it kind of fell by the wayside because other people needed them or because their work ethic got in the way of their commitment to themselves. And so I started leading these self-care boot camps, really doing kind of some transformational coaching with people, women especially, self-aware, smart doers, and helping them really put themselves on the top of their own to-do list so that they can trade stress for ease. And so now I have the clinic part-time and this coaching practice where I help people see themselves through the lens of Chinese medicine so that they can make smarter choices in their daily life about how they want to live so that they can show up with more energy and vitality and just happiness.
Yes. And since you've been in the industry for, so many years, what have been some of the biggest changes that you've seen, maybe either in the, clientele coming to you? Is the stress the same as it was 20 years ago or more intense? Or what are some of those things that you've been seeing?
Well, I think one of the strengths of Chinese medicine has always been the ability to see someone as a whole person.
Mm-hmm.
Because in Western medicine, we're going to specialists who are only oftentimes honing in on one aspect of who we are. So we might be seeing a counselor for stress, and we might be seeing somebody else to figure out our gut issues, and we might be taking like an acid reflux drug or a sleep drug or whatever, and working with these different practitioners versus going to see someone for Chinese medicine where we can really look at the underlying root that is giving rise to many of the diseased branches that we call symptoms. And I feel like that's always been a strength of Chinese medicine because people have been missing that, like, who's going to see me as a whole person and who's going to take all this together and really make me a partner in the healing process. So I think that's always been so, like, pretty much that if allopathic medicine's strengths are really managing symptoms so that we can go on with our lives without necessarily addressing the problems underneath, for better or for worse. Or, I mean, given like emergency life-saving drugs, yeah, like those things excluded, surgery being another miracle, but not necessarily always a great option for the things that are problems in our daily lives. It's Chinese medicine has always kind of been in that like in between state of where you don't necessarily need or want a massive heroic intervention, but you do want something to change in the way that you're experiencing your body or your mind. But over the years, so I feel like always stress and anxiety have always been pieces of what I've been treating and helping people kind of see the connections between what they're doing and how they're feeling, or between how they're living and how they're feeling. But what I see is that the pace of life just keeps galloping faster and faster. And I think especially with the rise of technology and being plugged in all the time, and I think the statistics will bear me out on this, that people are feeling more time compressed. People feel like they have less time. We're taking less time. We're taking less vacation. Things like that. We're not seeing our friends as much. We're not, millennials are having less sex, being on their phones more. I mean, it's just really interesting how people are, I think the sense of isolation has increased, and that, and as we watch the kind of what the major prescription drugs are, that it used to be that Prozac was the number one, and now I believe it's an anti-anxiety drug. So we flipped from depression to anxiety. I think that's a reflection of the pace of life and stress. And so I see a lot of people struggling with doing less than they're humanly capable of, and especially women. I really see self-care as a feminist issue, because and especially, like when women are trying to work and parent and feeling like they're supposed to pretend that they don't have kids if they're in the workplace, and that, like, while feeling like they're being an inferior professional or an inferior mom. And it's because the pressures haven't changed, like the expectation of what a woman's supposed to do. It's like, oh yeah, be all you can be, but do it, in all the directions you possibly can. There's something's going to give. And no matter how smart and how capable and how much you love what you do for a living or your family, it's really hard to give everything your full attention all the time and feel like you have a life. And so I feel like really helping to dent the culture in terms of what we see as normal, that no one is served by us all as women having these impossible to meet expectations, beating ourselves up for not meeting them while working ourselves into the ground.
Yes. I mean, I just had a client tell me this morning, she was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have went on vacation last week because now I'm coming back to work and I just want to crawl in a hole. I have so much stuff to do. And she runs her own business. She's like, I am so behind and I'm catching up now and I'm never going to be caught up. And I'm like, oh man, like that's not the right attitude, that we're like, we just keep working. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Well, and just let's just take that in for a moment. Just as you said that, I'll never be caught up. The visceral sense of constantly being overwhelmed, of constantly being behind the ball. It's like that is a perpetual source of stress. And that's going to take its toll physiologically. It's going to take its toll on our hormones. It's going to take its toll on our happiness. And it's the kind of thing where, like, how different if you just felt like you had all the time in the world, you still have all the responsibilities that you have, but you could take your time and move at your own pace. Doesn't that feel totally different in your body?
Oh yeah. Yes. I mean, just the freedom that it has. And you're just kind of like, I can breathe. Like I can breathe again.
Yeah. And that's in Chinese medicine, the liver. Right? The liver is the free and easy wanderer. It's the organ that has to do with everything unfolding according to its right and proper timing, whether that's the rhythms of digestion or being able to fall asleep easily, or the rhythms of menstruation and ovulation, or just all of everything in life that happens according to a rhythm. The liver is responsible for doing. And it's also responsible for the free flow of emotions in the body. So anytime that we get stressed and tight, anytime that we hold our breath, anytime that we find ourselves sighing, it's like it's the liver is crying out for unleash me. Like, that allowing ourselves to move in proper rhythm and timing is essential if we want these other things to move in proper rhythm and timing. And so the fastest way to to have problems arise is to take ourselves away from nature's rhythms, right? To push ourselves to make our days longer and make our nights shorter, or to pretend, like the woman who said that she made a big mistake about going on vacation last week. It's like, could the same be said for like going to bed last night? Like, oh yeah, that was a terrible mistake. I lost so many productive hours that I could have been working. But we all know that yin and yang are essential to balance one another, and that you can't have good yin, or you can't have good yang rather, of productivity and focus and your ability to do if you haven't really sunk in to the depths of rest and rejuvenation. And so it's like, it's one of those things that we see that all in time in nature. You can't have day without night. You can't have winter without summer. You can't have hot without cold. You can't have inside without outside. You've got to go to the polar opposite in order to have the other side of the coin. And so we forget that in our yang addicted culture, where really it's the masculine values of speed and productivity and how it looks instead of how it feels, and superficial stuff as opposed to deep soul longings, and doing it more and doing it faster as opposed to really being in an experience and being present. It's like our values are all out of whack. So even if you're like, well, those aren't my values, it's really hard to stay the course in a society that's just going to keep rewarding you for overdoing and overexpending your energy budget.
Yeah. I mean, as you were, just kind of describing everything with the liver, I was like, oh, this is also why it's such a problematic thing when like people numb out by having a glass of wine every night then, because then you're just really kind of going there and getting into kind of a funk and a cycle that is not really helping you. But at the time you think it is.
Oh yeah, it totally can feel like medicine if you've been speeding all day
Yeah.
to use a glass of wine to help relax the nervous system and to slow down. And it's like that absolutely can be medicine in the moment, and it can certainly feel like that. But over time, if you're doing it every single day, then that's ultimately going to be a big drag on the liver. And it's going to be very, that slowing you down to the point of really, just enabling, it's really self-medicating a pattern that is worth breaking as opposed to medicating from.
Yeah. So what would you suggest for some of those just routines and those daily routines in your life that can kind of help maybe you bust out of some of those habits that you might have formed that are not serving you?
Well, it's always, I think, first of all, just really important to not slap your hand away from the proverbial cookie jar without looking for why you're reaching for it in the first place. So there's nothing wrong with having a glass of wine in the evening at all. At the same time, if it's the kind of thing that you are where like that's how you relax, if the need is for slowing down, if the need is for relaxation, if the need is for just the ability to exhale, that need could be met in a variety of other ways. Like you could go for a walk. You could go, you could come home and do a little qigong or yoga or meditation or exercise. You could shift gears in any number of ways. You could just go outside and sit and be, or relax with a cup of tea. If it's truly just like you just want to sit on the couch, like give yourself permission to do those things. Investigate the reason behind the habit that you're wanting to break. And I see a lot of people, especially claiming that they don't have a lot of time, but what they're doing, they are actually spending time on things that don't really give back to them, like numbing out in front of Netflix or like numbing out with a glass of wine, either one. It's like either that because there is a real need for relaxation, there's a real need for space, but at the same time, I think as women, we can have a hard time claiming it if it means potentially inconveniencing someone else in our lives. And so a lot of women that I work with really have a lot of success with starting their day with a lot of the essential practices that they need to stay focused. And so the number one thing that I suggest to people to feel like you're not subject to this time compression all the time is to simply get clear on what really needs your attention on in a given day. And in order to do that, that requires either some reflection the night before, where you're thinking, like, where you're feeling into the future and you're thinking, okay, tomorrow, who needs me on my A game tomorrow? Or like, what really needs my focus tomorrow? and just come up with 3 things. If there's more than 3 things, good luck. But just getting really clear as to where you want your vitality and energy to go. Or doing it first thing in the morning where you wake up, you do a little bit of meditation, just connecting with yourself, connecting with why you're alive, right? Like, or whatever your spirituality is about, whatever you feel connected to, whatever you feel inspired by, whatever you take guidance from, connecting to that. And then from there, getting clear on what really, again, you need to focus on, because it's so easy to get distracted by things that pop up and the urgent things that are not actually important, and then just sort of spending all this energy not wisely. So really, if we can automate simple daily routines and bring those onto autopilot, we free up so much energy for actually living our lives instead of just sort of numbing out to medicate from how stressful they are. So I usually encourage the power of a morning routine. And once you have, like, if you're getting up an hour before your kids are, or if you're getting up even 15 minutes before anybody else in your household, you have this little sacred opportunity where it's just you, before the world dictates what your priorities are, to get clear and to then be able to marshal your energy from a place that's really driven from you, and from a sense of a centered present place, as opposed to a reactive place.
Yeah. And what do you say if people are like, oh, I'm totally just not a morning person? Would you be like, okay, it's okay to do in the evening? Or how do you kind of combat that because I've had a few people are like, oh, I'm not a morning person. I'm like, but then it's hard for them to
Yeah.
get it in during the day.
Sure. Well, exactly. And the reason is that we're creatures of willpower. Or sorry, we are not creatures of willpower. We are creatures of habit, right? So, and willpower is this thing that is magically renewed every night by sleep. So when we wake up in the morning, we have as much willpower as we're ever going to have. And willpower is depleted by stress. It's depleted by low blood sugar. It's depleted by having to make decisions. It's depleted by all sorts of things. But fresh first thing in the morning, we have the most. And so if we're trying to create a new habit, that takes willpower. Until something's on autopilot, it takes effort. And so even if you're quote unquote not a morning person, you still have a first thing in your day. You still have a first thing that you're doing in the day before that willpower battery starts to get sapped. So it could still apply if you're trying to create a new habit, doing it first thing, whenever that first thing is. And also, there is something to the notion of that our identities are, like that. Where was that identity created that you're not a morning person? It's like, did that form when you were a teenager and your biorhythms were legitimately different than they are as an adult? Like, is there something that is sort of like, there's a part of you that identifies with like either the creative like artist who's up in the middle of the night, or the rebel who's like staying out late? That there can be some things that aren't necessarily valid anymore. So I would question that assumption and test out, like, well, how do you feel if you were to maybe go to bed a little earlier every night, 15 minutes earlier, and see if you could just get up 15 minutes earlier and just ratchet back slowly and experiment with what it's like to actually change the start of your day. And you can always change it back, but that not getting too attached to your own preconceived limitations can be a really important thing to help you really in the laboratory of your own body suss out what's going to work and what isn't going to work.
Yes. And yeah, I totally recommend the same thing for people. And, just noticing, like, my husband, like, he considers himself a night owl, and, but he works late. And so like his, kind of time to unwind is in the evening versus morning. Cause I'm out training and I'm up early, and, he's with our son, and, like some of that though, that's not how he always was, before our son was born. Like, he could get up earlier and have that time. And it's just, he's kind of flipped because of it. So sometimes you have to kind of look at those, your life circumstances too, as you were saying, just kind of seeing, okay, this could be why all of a sudden this flipped in my life. And I've just been running with that story. And really it's maybe only a couple of years old.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, to circumstances changing, and that maybe we can re-examine that.
Yeah.
Also, there's all sorts of studies about people who are self-proclaimed night owls. There's that one study where they took these people to a place, basically took them camping, took them away from artificial light, took them away from melatonin disrupting blue lights and screens and stresses of daily life. And all of these people who claim to be night owls got back into a normal diurnal rhythm of waking up with the sun and going to bed like shortly after after dusk and things like that, and having no sleep problems whatsoever in a
Oh,
relatively short amount of time, which I find fascinating.
that is awesome. And I'm totally going to use that with my husband. I'll be like, see,
Mhm.
this is what you need to do. Plus, I want to go camping. So that's a nice excuse for us to go camping.
Yeah, yeah. This episode is brought to you by my Healthy Habits course, Level Up Your Life. Since autopilot dictates about 40% of what happens to us every day, wouldn't it be great if those autopilot routines were the ones we needed to thrive? They could be.
Doing this work of habit change with a supportive coach and a network of allies allowed the foundation of my daily habits to automate. I'm now free to move through the world with greater ease and to focus my energy on what matters most.
You don't have to default to stress, overwhelm, and numbing out. Step by step, you can lay the foundation for abundant energy, resilience, confidence, and trust in your body. If it's time for you to start a new groove, whether it's meditation or exercise, getting more sleep, or speaking more kindly to yourself, I'd love for you to consider Level Up Your Life. It's so hard to change habits on your own, and so much easier when you have a group of like-minded peers all working towards similar goals. We get rolling for the next round in January 2020, so now is the time to apply. The first 5 people to enroll are going to get a super sweet early bird discount, so today would be an excellent day to head to brodywelch.com and apply.
So when we're talking about like just our addiction to just that go on the go lifestyle, I know social media plays a big factor for a lot of people. Is sometimes we just get sucked into our phones so easily. Do you have any like tips for people to kind of help walk away from the phone and not maybe that increases their anxiety? I know it increases quite a few. I think they said after it was like 3 minutes. Maybe it wasn't even 3 minutes, could have been shorter than that. But after looking for like fashion bloggers, like that increased people's anxiety, like to the point where they were just like so anxious that they just kept scrolling and scrolling, kept it longer and longer. But after that 3 minute mark, it was just all in their heads. Any tips around that for people to kind of maybe, especially the younger generation too, and helping kiddos out and how to get off the phones?
Yeah, that's a really important topic, I think. I think first off, though, just is to back up a little bit, if there is the addiction to doing is culturally reinforced in so many ways. And I think it's like, I just want to call myself out on that as well, that like I am the ultimate yang addict. I am perpetually taking on more than I can reasonably accomplish, and then perpetually feeling dissatisfied with myself for having done so. And so I think first of all, just to extend some compassion for the people who are in that space, that our identities can get created around being the doer, right? Or the one that can accomplish a lot of things, and recognizing that bringing our self-worth back to the fact that you are valuable and worthy, even if you just did nothing. By virtue of the fact that you're alive and the fact that the presence that you radiate has so much more of an effect on the people around you than the things that you say or do a lot of times. And so just to give ourselves, again, this is a cultural thing where we identify with what we do as opposed to who we are. And so that reframe is really reinforced by everything we're seeing on the internet, right? We're seeing everyone's social media highlight reels. We're seeing images of bodies and how we're supposed to dress and how we're supposed to look and how we're supposed to go on vacation and how we're supposed to have fun with friends. And, there's all these models that is, of course, everyone's highlight reel while you feel like you're living the blooper reel. And that idea of recognizing that, why exactly are you looking at your phone? Again, like looking at getting mindful of the reason why. Like, are you looking to feel connected? Is there another way you could meet that need for connection? Could you call a friend? Could you talk to somebody who lives in your household? Could you, could you reach out in a meaningful way that gets that need for connection met? Or even just cultivating the loose ties in our community, right? Just having casual conversations with people in our world. There's also the, are we trying to distract ourselves? Is it simply the dopamine hit that we get from seeing that somebody liked something that we posted on social media or whatever? So getting curious as to like what's causing us to reach for our phones. And one of the ways we can't really get curious about that if we're still on autopilot, if we're still just doing it all the time. So I highly recommend, first of all, just again with the morning routine, having your phone not be something that you check until you've checked in with yourself. So meditation, movement, hydration, personal hygiene, whatever it is that needs, say, making sure that your family members or your loved ones know that they are loved by you, aligning with your deepest truth or your higher power or God or whatever, whatever you want to align with. All of those things need to happen before you engage with the world. Also throughout the day. I mean, as a business owner, as someone with a lot of irons in the fire, a lot of times I will glance at my phone to make sure that I don't have to put out any fires that day. But once I've assured myself of that, and I can therefore relax into a morning routine that really serves me, I really try to be intentional about when I'm checking my phone, whether that's designated times or just giving myself time to actually do some deep work where I'm not interrupted by the distraction that's readily available to us always.
Yes. And I love that, the phone, just not picking it up right away. And that's just such an instinct for me. I usually always just have to check in case because I train early in the mornings. I'm like, make sure no one canceled on me. Okay, great. And then, I go into my meditation. I use it for a meditation timer, and I try not to open up the emails, and I don't open up, any social media. And then it just makes such a big difference. Like if you even just try it for a couple days in a row, just to kind of notice, okay, what are my habits? What are my routines? Because sometimes many people, when you pop open your phone, you're like, whoa, how am I on Instagram? And I didn't even consciously think I was going to go there. Yeah. And that's just where it went.
Well, that could be something where it sounds like you, and I do the same thing. I use my phone as a tool for a lot of things, but if those apps aren't on your phone for a couple of weeks, you can get really, then they're not there, and your phone is strictly a tool that's enabling you to marshal your energy in the direction of conscious choice as opposed to habit.
Yes. Oh, I did that. It took 6 weeks, I think, off Instagram. I deleted my app, and I just wasn't on there at all. And those first few days, I mean, when you go through it, you're like, whoa, this is challenging. I wanted to share everything I noticed. And I'm like, well, this is when you're on your phone. I was just like, oh, I'm thinking in Instagram captions rather than living my life. I'm like, how can I share this as a lesson? And that's when really caused me to pause. And I'm like, okay, I really have to reevaluate what I'm doing here. And now, having been on that break, now I've been back on for a few months, but I'm just I don't even think, my brain has not rewired to think in Instagram caption anymore, which is great. And I'm like, wow, this is some growth. And I'm sure I'm going to do it again, I think, over the summer, and just take another 6 weeks off, just because when you're off, you're not missing much. But I think we think we're missing out on so much in everyone's lives. But really, when you're not there, you're living your life, and you're noticing more what's going on in your life.
Exactly. You can always turn the app back on.
Yes. Yes. Oh, so one of the things that I noticed with Ayurveda, and I know with Chinese medicine, it's kind of that you're always evolving, and it's kind of a path of evolution. How do you see that in Chinese medicine as kind of a path for people to evolve?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you for asking it. It is so Chinese medicine and Ayurveda have a lot in common. I think the idea that everything in the world can be described as some kind of energy, right? So in Ayurveda, there's the elements, and in Chinese medicine, there's slightly different elements, but basically they're dimensions of the universe, or slices of all that is, that can exist within us. And at different times in our lives, certain energetics can be stronger, and certain, I think of the 5 elements in Chinese medicine: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, as being archetypes of different aspects of our personalities, different aspects of how we engage with the world. So, for example, I have a lot of wood in my constitution. So that upward, like a tree, always interested in new growth, moving upward and outward, teaching, leading, helping, role model. Those are characteristics of the growing edge, right? Of something that's moving in an upward, outward direction, like a tree moving upward out of the earth. And if all I ever do is that, I miss out on the downward, inward, reflective time. I miss out on the, which, could be something more yin, like the water element. I would miss out on feeling satisfied, right? If you're always moving the goalposts on yourself without ever really going through a phase of taking in what it's like to have accomplished something and to relax and enjoy the fruits of your labor, which would be kind of an earth phase of life, then it's like life is just not satisfying. And so we have all 5 elements within us, but we're born with one or two that tend to dominate. And those tend to be kind of like, those tend to be the colors that we paint with most, even though our palette has a lot more than that. And so we can become very one dimensional, or kind of like if our greatest strength becomes our greatest weakness. And so seeing Chinese medicine, seeing that we have all the elements within us, well, what would it be like to experience this? Or what would it be like to cultivate the fire element and have more joy and spontaneity in my life? What would it be like to cultivate metal, where I have more structure and routine? What would it be, so being able to look at like, what would be medicine for this phase of life that I'm in? And what would be actually adding fuel to the fire? What would be making things worse? And so there's ways like we move through these elements, and these elements are within us. And so thinking about kind of like the time in our life and what the energetics of that time of life is, and how we're approaching it. Because if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But in fact, there's lots more tools in the toolbox that we can pick up, and they just might not be the most natural ones, but they can be cultivated. And so I'm actually teaching this right now. I this group of women who have been in this self-care boot camp with me for now like maybe 11-week rounds. And they've really dialed in their body habits. They're getting good sleep. They've dialed in their nourishment, they're meditating, they're exercising. They've totally revolutionized their relationship with stress and with prioritizing themselves. And they're realizing that in doing that, it's pulling on things like who they think they need to be in the world, right? Do I need to be the people pleaser? Do I need to be the overdoer or the perfectionist? Do I need to be the hyper social one? Do I need to make everybody happy? Like all these ways that we navigate the world, which could be considered like the wood type, the fire type, these social maths that we try on. That now I'm taking those people on kind of a deeper journey where they're going to get to explore what it's like to live into each of the different Chinese elements. And so so anyway, in that sense, we evolve our identity by practicing what it's like to experience these things that aren't necessarily second nature.
Ooh, I love that. And if you don't mind, could you go through a little bit about each of the elements?
Sure. In terms of how it shows up in a person, or
let's do that. Yeah. Because I don't know if we've had anyone talk about them. And so people might be listening and might be a little curious or like, okay, but what are these elements?
Sure. Well, so water element, and there's like, I love teaching on this stuff. And so trying to wedge it into a short podcast recording is a tall order, but I will try. So water has like every element has a yin and a yang aspect of it. And that's especially true of water, which can be quiet and reflective, like a still pond or a pool, or it can be powerful like the Pacific Ocean, right? It can be tumultuous and big. Mm-hmm. But in general, the water element it's reflective, it's inward, it knows who it is and what it's about, right? So like these people, like they cultivate a spiritual path, they cultivate meditation. They're in Chinese medicine, the water element goes with kidney and bladder, which is said to house our purpose or our essential essence. So it's about really like knowing who you are and your purpose in the world. Mm. And so water element, if we want to cultivate the water element, it really requires a lot more alone time, a lot more downtime in general. And it's also where our will lives. So our will, as in our being aligned with our own destiny, with kind of like what we're here to do, what's uniquely ours, what's our curriculum. And then from there, so that's our potential. And then as potential moves towards actual, so you water a plant to make it grow. So water moves into wood, and wood is that upward, outward energy of a tree growing. And so those qualities are going to be upward and outward. They're going to be being assertive. They're going to be the emotion associated with the wood element is anger, right? So it could be, or stress. It's the liver and gallbladder that are the organs associated there. So it's about, feeling. So wood element lessons could be about having the courage to go after your dreams and goals and being able to methodically plot a path to get there. It could be also, like for someone like me who's got that in spades, it could be about how can the tree be flexible and bend in the wind instead of being so rigidly committed to growing in a particular direction. So it can be, so lessons for the wood element could be about flexibility and cultivating, allowing there to be this balance of effort and ease that we talk about in yoga that is essential for for there to be sort of like balancing, because wood is halfway between water and fire being the most yang of the elements. Fire is the doing it. It's fire traits are like, or think about a campfire, right? People want to gather around it. It's warm, it's generous, it's social. People are talking around a campfire. It's so it's very, a lot of extroverts, like those qualities. And I'm using them, it's like we all have these traits within us, as I mentioned, but some of us have them more than others. And so it has to do with, like, fire's never the same. It's constantly changing. It's dynamic. And so we need to leave room for spontaneity in our lives. If we're driving hard, it's like all the energy can be stagnating in the wood element, and we never get any space to just see where that might go, and so the possibilities that can only exist when in the present moment. So that's going to be fire. And then earth is going to be that. Earth is some qualities of earth people. Like the earth itself, it tends to be very supportive and grounded and nurturing and sweet. So people who want to just take care of other people tend to have a lot of earth in their constitution. So teachers and healers, and the people who want to support other people, parents. A lot of times, like, there's some earth that's required in order to be a loving parent. And at the same time, those people often need to learn the lesson that it is also okay to be generous and giving and loyal to themselves, and that it's okay to have boundaries while caring for others, and that it's okay to be sweet to ourselves. It's okay to take it in and be nourished by our lives. And then metal is the qualities, like, metal is very discerning. Like, metal is lungs and large intestine. It's taking in and letting go. And so it's the ability to be organized, the ability to declutter, the ability to let go of what's no longer useful and not be sentimental or holding on to the past. It's the emotions are grief and sadness, things like that. So too much of stagnation in the metal element can make us either really rigid or like not letting go of anything, right? And feeling stagnant and stuck. And so those are just a little bit of an overview into what those elements can be all about.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm like sitting here like taking notes. I was like, oh gosh, that might have been for me, but I'm sure someone listening is also wanting to know a little bit more about that.
Well, if they want to know a lot more about it, I teach on this stuff. I have a Basics of Chinese Medicine online course that anyone can go through at any time. It's a learn from home. And it's, it can be really, you'll never see the world the same way again once you look through the lens of the 5 elements.
That's what I always tell people when I introduce them to Ayurveda as well, is like, and now you're just going to see things in a whole different way. And I'm like, oh, I want to know a little bit about Chinese medicine now too. And how, because I'm like, okay, I can see the doshas in each of those and how these all relate. And I mean, I just think it's just great stuff to know. And just, it is a different way to look at things.
Yeah. And it's really the language of Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. It's like sometimes there's a metaphor that just really captures something in life really beautifully. So like once you know one energetic medicine, I think it's easy to kind of apply that or transfer it and look through another lens.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, I want to know where people can find you and connect with you and learn more about your podcast, A Healthy Curiosity. Just tell people a little bit about some of the topics that you talk about and guests that you have on.
Sure. Well, A Healthy Curiosity is on being well in a busy world, which is a pretty broad mandate. But generally speaking, I'm terrible at pretending that I don't know anything. So kind of like you, I make it a conversation, not an interview. But I have guests that do deep dives, a lot of functional medicine practitioners who I know, but also a lot of people who are just in my personal circle who have learned something about how to make life sane. So I have, like recent episodes on topics like mindfulness. I did a deep dive on poop. I've done a lot of stuff on women's hormones, a lot on just like the Chinese. I did a solo show on forgiveness because that's basically the liver detox of the spring. So just kind of a different take on that from an emotional, so I love the psycho-spiritual stuff and I go there a lot. But I also I'm very left-brained as well, and am grounded in the world of I'm intrigued by the overlap between science and these ancient medicine traditions. So a lot of conversations on that stuff, and but especially useful for women, and especially around. I mean, like we're constantly talking about kind of the practical tips for daily life. So that is available at brodywelch.com, Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH, also wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah, and probably, yeah, my website, I occasionally send out newsletters, but not as often as I should. And I am also on Facebook, probably is the social media platform that I am on the most these days, but I'm really not showing up there as I'm trying to pare back. Honestly, it's so much of my energy is going towards the podcast and the people that I'm coaching. And so, yeah, if anyone is interested in kind of implementing what they know they need to be doing to take care of themselves, but not actually doing it, and are interested in self-care from a Chinese medicine perspective, then I would love to connect with you.
I love it. Yeah. And definitely check out all of her stuff. Her podcast is awesome. So I like to tune in, and like the one you just had, I think it was this week with the kiddos, and talking about mindfulness, and trying to pick up tips already for my 3-year-old. And
oh, great.
I try out side out breath, which actually works really nicely. And then as you were saying that, taking a deep breath was for the liver. I was like, very cool. All connected. So I always have one final question that I ask. And this one, I like to give out a weekly challenge to all the listeners. And when I have guests on, I have you throw out a little weekly challenge for everyone. So what would you like that weekly challenge to be?
Oh, this is one of my favorite things, because it's so hard for people. So it's basically it's a do less-a-thon.
Ooh.
So do less than you're humanly capable of, and give yourself points, kind of like sorting hats, or, like a Harry Potter style, like 15 points to Gryffindor, right? So the idea of like, hey, when I was having friends over this weekend, instead of making the 2-hour recipe, I decided to make the 30-minute curry, like 20 points for me. Or like, oh yeah, I actually didn't, I didn't spend I decided that I actually didn't need to volunteer for this extra commitment that was going to stress me out and make me a crazy person, in favor of sitting home and reading a book and having some downtime. So like 50 points for me, because that was really hard to do. So really just kind of looking at the choices where you could make that will be in service of your highest values while not overdoing.
I love that. And that is definitely a new challenge for us. So I will partake in that one as well and see what I can do less of. I like it.
It's fun to have an accountability partner for this one, is to like engage a friend and like just either text each other or email each other or something like that, and just claim the credit of like, where did I do less today? What can I give myself credit for not doing, so that I can line up with what matters most? And it's really fun to see kind of like, oh yeah, like I had a woman in one of my courses this week who literally did not do an assignment that she was dreading because she already had an A in the class, and she was like, I could just stay up all night and do this assignment, or I could not do it and still get an A in the class. And that, and she didn't actually care about learning it. She just, anyway.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things where it's like, what, if it doesn't actually serve you, maybe you don't actually have to do it at all.
Yes. I love that. And I was taking that approach too. I was like, I'm going to quit Facebook. I don't know if I can do that, because then I think you lose your ads account. But like that, those are some of the ones I was like, I'm going to quit this and this. And then I had to actually see what I, was practical. But I love that. And I love that we can kind of tune into the life and see what are we doing that we can eliminate. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure having you on, Brody. I've loved all the information that you gave everyone. And hopefully you guys can check out her podcast and her website as well, and all the different programs she runs. So thank you again, Brody.
Thank you so much. This has been a really fun conversation.
Hey, and everyone, go out there and spread your peaceful power.
Thanks for listening today. To check out the show notes, get on my email list, or drop me a line, head to brodywelch.com. That's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH. I'd love to hear from you. If you learned something new or feel inspired to try something different in your life, I'd love for you to pay it forward by sharing this episode with a friend who you think could also benefit, and give them a reason to listen. You'll be helping to create a world where we encourage each other to embody self-respect. Till next time, be good to yourself.